Ethan Russell, welcome to the Chamber of Commerce. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're running for the Green Party in Kitchener South-Hespeler.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever think you'd be there?
You know what? I would sometimes entertain that thought when I was young, but once I did actually get involved in politics, I always thought, I'm more of a background guy. I'm a volunteer. I'm a data guy. I'm not really the running type. But,
Yeah.
Extenuating circumstances have put me in this position, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. No, it's great to see young folks stepping to the plate because it is your world. It is time for you to start stepping up and making the decisions that are going to be in your best interest and the future use of in their best interest as well. I do like to explain the growth of my hair because I look a little bit, somebody said to me the other day, you got the Einstein look going on. I said, well, that's appropriate because everybody's asking me questions all day and I'm giving them answers. So, it's a little bit like Einstein. But fact of the matter is, the last few months I had a minor surgery in December and I had another minor surgery on my neck here about a week and a half ago. But and everything's fine, by the way. It's wonderful. The only thing is I can't shave, so that's why I'm like this. I got to wait till this heals so that I can shave. But the reason I bring that up, Ethan, is I had a wonderful experience in spite of the fact that I had to go through what I had to go through. The experience was great, not because of the procedure, because the procedure is never great to have done to you, but the experience was great because of the people. Mm-hmm. The people were fantastic. The doctors, the surgeons, the medical staff at the hospital, everybody that did the best that they could possibly do to make me feel comfortable as I possibly could, but more importantly, to attend to my own personal health needs. Mm-hmm. And we went through the pandemic where, probably the two minor surgeries that I had, I wouldn't have been able to get through the pandemic because there were more important things to have done. But we found out that there were deficiencies in our system for exactly that reason. I wouldn't have been able to have the surgeries I had during the pandemic because of it. So we learned a few lessons of, where our weaknesses are in our system. But we seem to be past COVID now. We don't seem to be thinking about that, especially in this federal election. Obviously, we know tariffs is the agenda item. But do you think that we're going to forget about those things that need to be addressed? And do you think that there's a role, even though it's a provincial mandate, that there's a role for the federal government to make sure we get the health care we need?
I mean, yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that your surgery went well.
Thank you.
It's great that we can talk with you today. And I mean, I echo your sentiment. Over the summer, I had to spend 6 hours in the hospital because I had a problem with my heart. Back in October, I had to get my wisdom teeth removed. That was a fun experience. So, I hear what you're saying. I had great experiences with those, but you can really clearly see those deficiencies. I think, well, yes, it is a provincial issue. The federal government has been stepping up. Mm-hmm. We saw that we have the dental care plan. We saw that we have the pharmaceutical plan. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot that we can do with those. Like the funding of the hospitals, a lot of that is provincial, it's municipal. Mm-hmm. But we can do more for the federal government to invest. I mentioned I got my wisdom teeth removed. Well, that wasn't covered by the dental plan. Mm-hmm. So now my family is out $5,000. That's a lot of money. And on top of that, I had a cyst in my tooth. Luckily, it was benign. It was the lowest level risk cyst, but it was still a cyst. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get that removed as fast as possible.
Yes.
But that added another $500 to $1,000. Mm-hmm. However, if that cyst was anywhere else in my body, the federal government would have covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a case where it's there's some of these things where I was sitting there thinking, my family, we're struggling to get by sometimes. Mm-hmm. We're feeling these tariffs, and yet here it is, we're having to shell out money because my tooth decided to grow a cyst.
Yeah.
And so I think that the federal government, we need to protect a lot of these dental plans and pharmaceutical plans. We need to expand them. I think also one of the policies that we recently announced was the fact that we support tuition-free college.
Yes.
Now, I think, while there might not be the case in which we can, secure that for everybody, I think we can do a lot to secure it for specific programs at the very least. Mm-hmm. And things like nursing and doctoring is one of those things that I think is very important too. Mm-hmm. One of my good friends, her sister is a nurse. And, she spent a lot of time in school. And I think, we have, in some places, shortages of nurses. We just do. And I think that if we can encourage people to become nurses by, covering a lot of those costs, I think that would go a long way. We might not be able to build new hospitals at the federal level. We might not be able to, get down to the nitty-gritty details of OHIP, because again, that's provincial.
Yep.
But I think that there is a lot that we can do with the health plans that we currently have to expand them.
Yeah, no, there's certainly, we all operate, the provinces all operate under the Canada Health Act, so there is a role for the federal government, there's no question about it. We see that with pharmacare and the universal dental program as well. I think those, certainly suggest that the federal government's got a role to some degree in it. But, even following along a little bit on that subject, but we get more into the real reason we're having an election right now. There's never been more uncertainty than today. There was a lot of uncertainty and anxiety through the pandemic. There is no question about it. But there's never really been the level of uncertainty that we see today from business. And I tell every politician that comes in to see me, look, what you need to understand first and foremost, in order for you to do what you need to do and want to do, there has to be a business transaction so that there's revenue for you to do the thing you want to do. So the core principle of any government should be to ensure we've got a strong, vibrant, resilient economy. We've had a president from another country, disrupt the entire economic system. From the Green Party's perspective and your perspective, what are the important things out of this election do you think your party will rise to the top to ensure we can have a resilient, strong, and vibrant economy?
Yeah, I think at the core of it, we need to diversify. I think that the biggest weakness that Canada's economy feels today is the fact that we are too overly reliant on a few select things. So much of our economy is natural resource extraction that goes to the United States. It's let's pump out our oil, send it to the States. It's let's cut down our trees, send it to the States. There's not a whole lot of manufacturing anymore. My father works in manufacturing, and even his company, they've started to ship to Taiwan and whatnot in Japan. But a lot of it is still like Harley Davidson, Ford, Chevy. It's a lot of those people. So all of a sudden now you have this, foreign president of the United States, and right now it's Trump, but when Trump's gone, it could be anybody else who decides to then disrupt it. Well, all of a sudden we put all of our eggs into this basket. So I think first off, we need to diversify our trade. We need to focus our trade towards the EU, towards Asia, towards Africa, towards everywhere. Increase trade with Mexico. I see Doug Ford getting up here and it's like, oh, we're not Mexico. It's like, well, hold on. Me and us and Mexico, we're in it together. Yeah. Why don't we take this opportunity to also diversify our trade to Mexico? I think that, but also I think it's a big part about diversifying our economy just straight down. Yeah. A big part of the Green Party platform is to end things like rip and ship. So it's this idea of, we want to make sure that our natural resources are with us. Create that strategic reserve, but also create that reserve for new manufacturing industries to pop up. I remember reading, in Sweden, they have a lot of lumber. Lumber is a very important part. But a lot of it is finished lumber. It's planks. It's, furnishings, IKEA, whatnot. Us, it's just we cut down a tree and we send it. However, we can sell it for more if we're furnishing it. If we're turning it into furniture, if we're turning it into countertops. So I think we need to heavily invest in that. But I also think we just need more than natural resource extraction. I constantly see people posting this thing of, America is seeing a per capita investment increase all the time, and Canada is still below 2014, or we're not much higher. Well, that happened under Harper too. Because both the Conservatives and the Liberals are really focused on protecting the oil industry. They're protecting the gas industry. But what about all the other industries? What about all the other ways in which we can have a strong economy? We're a nation of 2 grocery stores. We're a nation of a few select big gas companies. We're a nation of 2 telecommunications companies. There's almost no focus given towards non-oil and gas industries. And I think we really need to focus on that. And even other parties like the NDP still have some of these ties to these oil and gas that I feel like just makes it to where the Greens are the only ones serious about wanting to diversify our economy in the way that we need.
Interesting. Incredible answer. Probably the best answer of all the candidates that have come in so far, which is really interesting to me, and it's probably your passion around your party and what you want to do in life. But you bring up a really good point, because this entire election around the tariffs is about how do we get away from being solely dependent basically on the United States. About 75 to 80% of everything that we produce in this country goes south of the border. But also what that means is because we largely are, as you rightly pointed out a few minutes ago, we are largely a resource economy. We need to get our resources. So how does the Green Party feel about coast-to-coast energy policy of let's get our oil moving to trade water, let's get our resources to trade water, let's open up those avenues where we can take the natural resources that we have and not just market them to south of the border where it's easy to throw them on a truck and drive them down there, but actually get them to tidewater where the rest of the world can also participate.
Typically, I don't like oil and gas, obviously. That's a big Green Party thing. But that's not to say that energy is not a thing that we can't be shipping out. Specifically, I really like the idea of us bringing ourselves back up on top with uranium. We have a lot of uranium reserves, and we used to be the top producer of uranium for the entire world. But then the oil and gas industry told us to cut that back because nuclear power plants threatened their bottom line. So while I don't like the idea of a coast-to-coast pipeline, I will be honest, I don't. I do like the idea of working with, the province. I know a lot of it is in Saskatchewan. Let's work with Saskatchewan. Let's work with the Indigenous people in Saskatchewan, and let's say, hey, let's try and get, clean nuclear power to the rest of the world. And, we can do it sustainably. We can do it tied together with to enrich our Indigenous people, to enrich our nation. We can do it through profit-sharing measures, and we can get more energy than just oil and gas through us. And I think that is a big part of, what I want to get to the heart too of, we can't just be talking about oil and gas. We can't just think of energy policy as natural gas and oil. We should be thinking also about we are in a great position to lead the world in nuclear power. I know the Green Party of Ontario recently at their last summit, they became pro-nuclear power. I love to see that. I was a big pusher of that. And I also still want to be a big pusher of that at the federal level, worldwide.
Yeah, there are some Greens though that aren't big on nuclear power.
Oh yes.
And I suspect it's because of the old, glow in the dark thing from uranium, right? Where the reality of it is everything's dangerous.
Yes.
But we still have to sustain life, and we have to figure out how to do it. We can't go back to, the only energy we have is, fires in the backyard. We just can't do that.
Right.
It just doesn't. There'd be too many fires going around, and everything would burn down, or the carbon emissions from fires alone would be, exhaustive. Not no pun intended. But I think it's really interesting. It's interesting to speak to folks like you who are, certainly passionate about the environment, because we have to find a way that makes sense from an economic perspective to move away from fossil fuels. There's no question about it. We have to find that way. But where is that path? Where in the future, Ethan, are we, literally not dependent on fossil fuels for our energy?
I think it's hard. If you asked me back in 2019, back pre-pandemic, when climate change was at the top of everybody's mind, I maybe would have said something like, I can see it within the next 10 years. Now, not so much. I think we have to be honest about the fact that there is both so much uncertainty in the world, like you mentioned, and also so much fear from people that we might not get there by 2030. But I do think that we can get there. I think that, coal, for instance, in this province, we shut that down a long time ago. Britain recently closed their last coal factory, first place in the world to ever have a coal factory, and now they have none. And so I think the fact that we've done that with coal shows that we can do that. And we are moving in other directions. For instance, as much as we might want to protect our oil industry, places like California, California already has the ban in place that I think it's in the 2030s, you won't be able to sell new gas cars. Well, at some point, it's less when will it happen and more it will happen. Are we ready for it? And I think that's kind of a big thing to think about.
And I think one of the proposals that's out there right now is talking about extending our electricity grid right across the country is really important for that to happen. Because right now, if someone were to say, next year you can't sell any more new gasoline-powered or combustion engines, it's got to be all EVs, we do not have an electricity grid that can handle that. We'd have brownouts all over the place, and you'd never be able to charge your car. So I think, but I think that is an important thing, and I think, they're talking now about, this national energy policy of making sure that we, bridge all of those gaps down the road. Speaking of all of that, Canada's always has been a world leader. We've always been the small little country, right? We got lots of mass, but we have fewer people. But we've always been very well respected on the world stage. It wouldn't matter who we had as a prime minister. It's the Canadian people that have always been, very friendly. Other countries love to have Canadians come and visit and spend their money there and help their economies. So global leadership, especially at a time like this when the globe is, in turmoil, global leadership is going to be very, very important for Canada. If we're going to open up new doors of opportunity for our trade, if we're going to truly do what you want to do is diversify, and every politician wants to do is diversify, that's going to take extremely well-played leadership on the foreign front. How do you perceive the landscape in Ottawa and all the players there as ensuring we have strong foreign leadership?
One thing that I do think is great about Canada is the fact that you mentioned, the fact that we have that history. And I think that history of, being a world player and being a respected one does actually go a long way. Even when people were saying, oh, Justin Trudeau's made us a laughingstock, he could still go to the EU at any moment and they'd give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
Not to the degree that America has kind of hurt their world image. So I think that is such a leverage. But I think it's also important that Canada maintains its player as kind of one of the last defenders of true legal world order, I would say, I guess is the best way to put it. It's the case of during the Suez Crisis, we operated as peacekeepers because we knew that, maybe our interests do lie with Britain. At that time, we were still with Britain technically, but we could recognize that, hey, Britain, France, and Israel invading Egypt to keep the Suez, that's not right. So I think maintaining that, saying with Ukraine, we can't, it might hurt our relationship with Russia, but we can't just waltz on in, and you can't let them waltz all in. You gotta protect them and whatnot. I think that also goes a long way. To that end, though, I think we also need to move away from core U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. basically came to us and said, we want you to tariff China for their EVs, and we did. And what happens now? Now, America's tariffing us, and China's putting retaliatory tariffs on us. Instead, I think we need to say, hey, we want to operate as a fair, equal player. We're not gonna, I don't want to see us tariffing China's EVs at a time in which we need more EVs. I think we can simultaneously encourage, the free market with a lot of these countries while also protecting our own industries. And if we just continue to go off of what the United States says, well, we're going to wound up in a lot of these issues where we're trying to act as a world hegemon for the world hegemon when we're not the world hegemon. And I think that understanding that, operating in a position of we want to ensure that international law is followed at all times, no matter what country it is, but we also want to make sure that we're coming to each country fairly, and that we're not just going to tariff you, or we're not just going to diplomatically isolate you because America said so. I've seen what happens in Syria. One of my best friends, he's Syrian. And, it feels like North America has been very silent on the new regime, when we could be going in there and being like, hey, okay, you got rid of Assad, let's work to open you back up. But instead, we still register the group as a terrorist group. And it's like, okay, well, obviously there's still a lot of uncertainty, but can we not go over to them and be like, hey, let's reconnect? Instead, we seem to just stand back and say, well, America hasn't done it yet.
Well, I see a foreign minister in your future, possibly. Very, very good. Ethan, tell us about you. Ethan Russell. Who is Ethan Russell? What does Ethan Russell do? Where'd you come from? How'd you get all of this passion for public service? And why should the residents of Kitchener South-Hespeler vote for you?
Well, I come from a working class family. As I mentioned, my father is a manufacturing worker. My mother is a stock manager at a retail store. So for all of my life, we've been decently well off. Been well off enough to go to college. They bought a home back in 2003. We go on vacations every now and again. But there's also always been this level of uncertainty, Even in '08, I was very young. My sister was just born. But my father looks back and he says, I thought I was going to lose my job. We look now to these U.S. tariffs, and it's like, well, what's going to happen? My dad's work only ships to the United States pretty much, and a little bit of Taiwan. Or my mother's work is a U.S. company. How is that going to survive? I personally work for a company that is owned by an American company. How is my job going to look? So a lot of it just does come from my upbringing. I've not come from a silver spoon. I've come from a working class background in a working class neighborhood. But as well, as I grew up, I saw strife. I saw struggle. I saw people. I didn't go to a private school. I went to a public school in the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. I went to St. Mary's High School, one of the biggest high schools in the province. I saw people of all walks of life. And there was never a point in which I thought, man, I'm so much better than them. I saw them struggle, and I'm like, I don't want that. I want to see them uplifted. Now, I'm studying early childhood education. And, that's a thing where it's like, well, I'm working with some of the youngest children you can work with, and, I want to see them grow up. I want to see them be happy. I want to see them succeed. Even if I'm just seeing a 3-year-old for 1 month and then I'm never going to see him again, I still want to know that that kid has a world that he can grow up to. And I also look around to my fellow educators and I'm like, I see so much uncertainty in this field. We have this $10 a day program that's great, but there's so many holes in it. And I don't see the Liberal Party talking about how to fix it because they want to share it as this fantastic thing. And I see the Conservatives saying they want to scrap it. Well, that $10 a day program has livened the early childhood education sector up so much. And it just feels like some of the time we have these incumbent leaders, be they Liberal, be they Conservative, be they NDP. And they always want to just take hold of what they can regardless. The Liberals want to advertise the fact that they did $10 a day, that they did dental care, that they did pharmacare. They don't want to talk about the holes. I want to go to our Liberal MP right now and I want to say, hey, this, and this don't work. But then I get nothing. Or I want to go to the NDP and I want to say, hey, your policy has this, and this hole. Can you fix it? Well, that doesn't sound as good. That's not as catchy. Or I want to see the Conservatives not try and rip up our social safety nets that have livened our community. $10 a day, it has saved the early childhood education sector in this country. I don't want to see that ripped up.
Yeah.
I think that my passion comes from the fact that I want to see Canada thrive. I want to see it succeed. I want to see it be a strong, fantastic place to live. And I can continuously seeing threats to that. And I think what I want to bring is, even if there's not a Green government, even if I'm just the third Green MP in Parliament, I want to bring an energy that I'm bringing here to Parliament. I want to fight for the people of Kitchener South-Hespeler. I want their voice to be heard. I don't want, a majority Liberal or majority Conservative government to simply get away with whatever they want. And if there is a minority government, and they come to me and they say, hey, will you prop us up? I'd be willing to do that if I feel it's in the best interest of the people of Kitchener, and if that means that we are getting these issues fixed.
Wow. Inspiring young man, Ethan Russell. I think, there's no question about it. You certainly have a future in politics. That is for certain. And, and I'm glad for it, because that passion is exactly what we need to see. As a guy who kind of went through the ranks a little bit, I served on local council. This was the kind of passion I brought to public service when I was there. And I think it's the kind of passion that we need. It does change the way things happen, and you just keep plowing forward and doing that thing, because I'm quite sure anybody from Kitchener South-Hespeler who sees this interview is going to say, that Ethan Russell's got a future, and maybe I think his future should be right now. So, Ethan Russell, good luck.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
All the best on the campaign trail.
Thank you.